Welcome to the New Writer Podcast. My name is Matt Brotherton, and this is a place where new writers and new stories can be found and shared with the world at large. This is going to be episode 0, in which I interview myself and tell you a little bit about what the podcast is and why I've decided to put it together. I am a big fan of the podcast world. I really enjoy the fact that indie publishing is growing and that the podcasts and the independent publishing atmosphere are a big part of developing that and making it happen. And I really like self-publishing podcasts, Rocking Self-Publishing Podcasts, the Self-Publishing Roundtable, the Creative Pen, Sell More Books show. I really love that we have these places where we can learn about the industry and about ways we can get our words out there and find the true readers or true fans and really grow the industry as a whole. So I like that. I like that we're able to do that. And what I was looking for was a place where writers who are maybe a little less known, who are still developing their fan base, could go on and talk about their work and who they are and let people who might enjoy who they are find them. So I decided that since I couldn't find that place for myself as a new writer, that I would just build it. And so Friday afternoon, I was home from work for lunch, and I bought the domain, and I set up the website, and I put a call out there saying, hey, writers, if you're interested, here I am. Well, it's been 2 days, so you can't really expect me to have found anybody whose schedule matches with mine enough to get that first episode out there, but I wanted to put something up there so people would know who I am, what the show is, and why I'm doing this. And so that's what this is this is me introducing you to the idea of the New Writer Podcast. And I'm hoping to do this weekly. I'm hoping to have a writer come on, or an artist, or a musician, or anyone in the independent movement, independent world, the underground, so to speak. Like, I want viewers of this show to be able to say, I knew them when. Like, this will be your ultimate hipster guide to finding new art. And that's my basic concept. And if I can't find people who want to be interviewed, well, I guess I will just do it myself. Which I think is the self-publishing, the indie attitude, is if I can't find someone who's willing to do it, I'll do it myself. So I decided that since this is going to be an interview show, what I would start with doing is interviewing myself. Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. It sounds like a dumb concept, but it is, so don't feel alone in that. I've put together a list of 5 questions that I'm going to ask everybody I interview, and as things come up, of course, we'll carry on a conversation. Really, the goal here, though, is for people to be able to learn about new writers, new artists, and for those writers to find people who are interested in what they have and really develop a connection with them from the beginning. And I think this is YouTube, especially, and podcasting in general, are a great platform for that. I have to stop looking at my camera. I think it's better when I look at the screen and not the camera, but I'm new to this, so bear with me. If you have any suggestions or complaints, feel free to send me a message here on YouTube or Google+. So let me start my interview with my 5 questions. My first question is, tell us about yourself. So my name is Matt Brotherton. I write fiction under the name M.A. Brotherton. My website is mabrotherton.com if you'd like to go and find out a little bit more about myself. I've been blogging for 3 years now and always was one of those wannabe writers. I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to build these huge epic worlds and just never did because, well, I was lazy. And about a year ago now, I moved from Kansas City, where I've lived in the Missouri my entire life, to Montana. And all of my social network and friends and my time sinks and my distractions kind of are 1,500 miles away. So here I was, and I was like, what am I going to do with myself? And I wrote a book. And that was November of 2013. During NaNoWriMo, I actually wrote a complete 68,000 word story. Spent December and January refining it, sent it off to be edited and proofread, and then published it in March. And since then, I've written a second book in that series, and 6 short stories serialized, adult comedy sort of thing with my friend Chris, and then wrote about halfway through the third book of that series. I've written another short story, Dinosaur Alien Invasion, and we'll be publishing another short story at the end of this week, this upcoming Friday. And I'm hoping to kind of do a short story once a month and write 4 of the 7 Keys books a year, and that's kind of who I am and what I'm doing right now, as well as trying to get back into blogging. I really enjoyed blogging. It was very cathartic for me. That actually probably already covers my second question, which is tell us about your book. So I'll go into a little more detail about the 7 Keys saga in particular. It's my legitimate work, I think, is how people would refer to it. It's my commercial work. 7 Keys saga is, I like to think of it as a new adult urban fantasy taking place in Springfield, Missouri. The cast is very much based on characters that I've known in my life, kind of merged together. It is about the first book, Choices, takes place about 2 years before the rest of the series will, but in Choices, Terry Howard is 19. He is an acolyte for the Order of Midnight. It's one of these 6 orders that have controlled magic since basically the dawn of humanity. They're a very esoteric, very arcane, very secretive society that has kept magic very hush-hush. People know it exists. It's out there. It's open. Their practitioners exist. Religions based around it all exist. Magic is very much a part of the world, but unless you were part of these orders, you were very limited in what you could do with it. So naturally, technology and things developed, sometimes on a little more advanced scale, because scientists were trying to emulate what the wizards were already doing. And 3 years before the start of the first story, the orders, after thousands of years of controlling magic in the world, finally break down and have a civil war. And Terry, at the age of 16, was forced to fight. He fought in this civil war. And so he very much is a survivor, suffering from all of those things that we associate with being a survivor of war, and is trying to find his place in the world. When we first encounter him, he's living in a 1-bedroom apartment with 4 other people. He's struggling to just make ends meet through use of his skills. He's kind of a shyster about it. He uses his ability to speak with spirits to perform exorcisms and things like that. And so as we find him in the story, he is actually investigating the suicide of a college student. Springfield is a huge college town, if you're not familiar with that. There are 3 fairly large colleges, including Missouri State University in Springfield, Missouri. And they're investigating the suicide because his ex-girlfriend believes that the kid killed himself because of demons. And as he gets drawn into this plot, his old mentor comes and thrusts him into a role that he's really not ready for, which is being the bearer of one of these 6 keys. The keys are magical focuses that control the veil, and the veil is what separates our world, the world of humanity, from the omniverse of all of these different planes of existence and all of these horrible creatures. And not to go too heavily into the backstory, because I can literally geek out about this all day. I spend so much time just doing world building, and I love that. But basically, Terry's job is to guard the veil. He gets pushed into the role. His mentor just goes, you know what? I'm done. I'm retiring. Here you go. Go do it. And from there, the rest of the series is really just him learning to cope with the fact that he has to be an adult. The second book takes place 2 years later and really starts... I like to think of Choices as like the 2-hour pilot movie for a TV series, and each of the books would then be kind of their own little self-contained thing, but still part of an overall flow. I think I'm very heavily influenced in how I write by Joss Whedon and Sci-Fi Channel television shows, things like that. And I really... really the concept of the book came about because I'm a huge fan of Jim Butcher and the Dresden Files, if you're familiar with that. I think anyone who's familiar with urban fantasy probably is. And I thought, well, I love Dresden Files, but what if we had a series of books about Harry when he was an apprentice, when he was a teenager? I think that would be a really interesting place to start. And that's where I kind of started mixing all of these little pieces of projects I'd worked on over the years together and came up with something very new. And I think as a writer, I'm still growing. I have to admit that. I am a new writer, and I think the people who have read my book so far have really enjoyed it, and I've gotten a lot of positive feedback. I really appreciate that. So if you are interested in urban fantasy, you can check that out. I also have written a few short stories. Like I said, I wrote an adult comedy series called The Alcohologist Chronicles with my friend Chris, who's known online as Yeti Detective. He and I had been trying to put together a webcomic since we were 18, since we were in high school, basically. And neither of us are particularly good at drawing. I doodle a lot. If you go to my website, mabrotherton.com, you will see a lot of doodles. But I'm not really what you would consider a talented artist. So I couldn't keep up with what Chris's storylines were, and we just kind of let it go to the wayside. And then last January, after writing Choices and discovering the self-publishing podcast and all of that wonderful world that was introduced to me because of that, I contacted Chris and I said, hey, let's do Alcohologist Chronicles as serial, basically. And we put together these 6 short stories that kind of almost have a continuity to them. In fact, we're calling season 1 Who Needs Continuity? But it's really just adult jokes and juvenile humor, and it's very sophomoric. One review we got on Smashwords basically said, this is well written, but I don't understand the point. And I think that's a pretty valid comment on what we wrote. And we intend to do more of that in the future, as well as some more actual serious writing now that we've gotten that out of our system, and there's some ideas there that we can go on, and we have a lot of things we want to work on. I don't know necessarily when we'll have the time to do that. I'm very focused on building these things over here, and when Chris is able to work with me, we put something together. But on top of that, I've written a couple of other short stories that are kind of little brain exercises, take me out of my comfort realm, work on something different. One of them is Dinosaur Alien Invasion, which was written very much for a friend of mine. Said, hey, I had this idea, can you write this? And I went, I've got a free weekend, so I did. And it is a short story, and I parody the Sci-Fi Channel movies, the like Sharknado. In fact, her first comment when I sent her the first draft was, it's got less plot holes than Sharknado, which made me go back in and try to find places to add more plot holes. But it's very much like a small town in Nebraska. Again, I try to keep everything I write in the Midwest, and Nebraska seemed like the perfect place for it because no one knows anything about Nebraska. But so it's this little tiny town in Nebraska, and aliens land there, and the aliens turn out to be dinosaurs. And they have to fight them off. In fact, the ending only exists as the ability to make a Second Amendment joke, and I think I've got a lot of really good feedback from people who have read that. Not so many reviews on Amazon or anything like that, but the people who have read it have thought it was really funny and cute. So if you want to check that out, you can. And then I just put out, if you sign up for my newsletter on my blog on mabrotherton.com, then you will get it right now. And I was on Facebook. I have a friend I ran a live action role playing game for years, and one of my friends from that game played a great orc, and I nicknamed him Concrete Lollipop, and he has been very supportive of my writing. So we were on Facebook one day, and he made a joke, and I said, well, I guess I'm going to write Concrete Lollipop Orc Detective. And so I sat down in between drafts 1 and draft 2 of this third Seven Keys book. I sat down and wrote this story with the intention of being this humorous kind of orc noir story, and it actually became much more serious than that. So I changed the name. It's now Vengeance Seeker. And the short story is kind of a little pilot. I'd like to write more in that world. I'd like to write more Dinosaur Alien Invasion stories too, but more in the world of Vengeance Seeker. And the first one, The Alchemist in the Arena, is available for subscribers on my newsletter and will be going up on the e-tailers probably at the end of this week, like Friday at the end of August, basically, August 2014. If you're watching this way in the future, so that's my writing career summed up in 10 minutes, 15 minutes, I guess. Tell us about your influences is question 3 of when I will be interviewing other writers, and I think I've already said I'm very heavily influenced by Joss Whedon as far as how I structure a story and how I look at characters. I think that when you're telling a story, regardless of how ridiculous or insane the situation that these people are in, the story really is about people being people. So when you're reading Seven Keys, and yes, this urban fantasy with this big idea, this huge world of magic and intrigue, and it could very easily have gone the route of like an epic fantasy storyline. It's not. It's not what it's about. It's about this 19-year-old kid who's kind of having problems with his life and his messed up friends and this little town they live in and the things they struggle with and racism and just prejudice and like religious intolerance and all of this is the focus is on who these people are, interpersonal relationships. The fact that Terry is bad at relationships, Terry is bad at people, is a big part of who he is as a character. The struggles of his apprentice with his abusive father are part, it's these things happen in this world. The world for them is very real. Magic is a real thing that happens, and these crazy adventures are just everyday mundane life. And what the story really focuses on is them as people and how they interact with each other. And I think I learned that from Joss Whedon. And as far as writing goes, I think my biggest writing influences, or at least the writers that I love the most, would be Jim Butcher. I'm a huge fan of the Dresden Files, like I've already said. I'm a big fan of Brandon Sanderson. I read a lot of what Sanderson writes, those big 1,000-word or 1,000-page doorstop novels. I just love Brandon Sanderson. I love Robert Jordan, and I think that's how I got into Brandon Sanderson, to be honest. Although I read the Mistborn trilogy before he took over. Before I read his stuff that he had written for the Wheel of Time world. I'm really getting into Stormlight Archive. I can't wait for the 3rd book to come out, even though the 2nd book just came out this year. I like Patricia Briggs as an urban fantasy writer. My biggest influences right now, though, are probably the self-publishing podcast, the Sterling and Stone guys, David W. Wright, Sean Platt, and Johnny B. Truant. A lot of what they write, and they're like, especially Johnny's style of writing, have a big impact on how I see the structure of my words. And their stories are very inspirational. And if they're good stories, I love their stories. I love reading their writing. But the fact that they are out there doing it and letting us know, that makes it a big part of how I see myself as a writer. And I think if anyone is looking for any kind of story, they've got you covered. David Shawn writes some amazing Stephen King-esque, like, dark fantasy and sci-fi, and especially if you're a fan of Stephen King, you should check them out. Especially Yesterday's Gone. I love Yesterday's Gone, and I've been recommending it to all of my friends who are Stephen King fans. I'm like, check out this book, get it now. And then, like I said, they've got sci-fi and fantasy, and all of it is just enjoyable stories. So those are my big influences. Now, my 4th question in every interview is going to be a randomly generated internet question, because I kind of want to, boom, hit it from left field. And I did not actually previously search for one for myself, so I'm going to do one right now. And here's my question. It's random question number 61. How many bricks are there in Shanghai? Consider only residential buildings. 1,982 per square foot. That's and they're really tiny bricks in Shanghai. That's how they roll. So that's gonna have to change. That's just not good YouTubing there, I don't think. Okay, and finally, each week I will, as I do the interview, I'm going to ask writers to tell us about a book that's not their own that they think everyone should read. And I am actually, because I imagine the majority of people who will be watching this show will probably be writers to begin with, especially this particular episode, as they're trying to figure out who I am and what I'm about. So the book I'm going to suggest everyone who is watching this right now, every writer out there, and everyone who dreams of being a writer is going to be Write, Publish, Repeat. That's Write, Publish, Repeat. And it's by Sean Platt and Johnny B. Truitt, with some awesome interviews with indie artists in the back by David Wright. And I think it is the book that will tell you you can do this. So I think every writer out there should read it, and I think every indie artist, every musician, because there's just, you can do this. You can start with just your brain and whatever talent and skills you want to develop, and make it into something more. And I think everyone can do that, and I think everyone should try to do that. And I think you can't let something like laziness or fear hold you back. And this book is the kick in the ass that a lot of people will need to make that happen. So anyway, this has been episode 0, interview with M.A. Brotherton for the New Writer Podcast. I hope you enjoy it. If you would like to be part of this show going forward, just send me an email. You can email me at mbrotherton@gmail.com, or mabrotherton@mabrotherton.com is probably better. I have created an email specifically for the New Writer Podcast, contact@newwriterpodcast.com, but the web hosting that I'm using hasn't fully set up and started working it yet, so I can't receive those emails, and unfortunately they didn't tell me that until like 2 days, a day into doing this, and so I don't know how many people have emailed me that I can't actually know about, but I just wanted to get this out there and get an idea of what I was going to be doing, and see if I could actually talk to myself for 20 minutes without getting incredibly embarrassed and nervous. And I think as far as things like that go, I'm a 6. Maybe a 4. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you'll catch us next time. You can subscribe to this channel. You can check out the website, newwriterpodcast.com. Check out my website, mabrotherton.com. You can find me on Twitter at mabrotherton, or Facebook, or mabrotherton.com/Facebook. And I look forward to hearing from you, hearing your ideas, hearing your thoughts, hearing all of that stuff. So have a wonderful, wonderful afternoon.